I never thought 6 months could feel like an eternity, but living without hearing from my own family made it one. My phone was a silent graveyard of missed calls and unread messages, all from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And the worst part? I didn't even know exactly why they had decided to block me. My name is Elena Harper, and until recently, I was just your average 27-year-old living in Austin, Texas. I had a decent job at a tech startup, a small apartment with a view of the city skyline, and friends who were more like chosen family than the people who shared my DNA. Yet, despite the life I had built for myself, there was always this invisible wall between me and my parents, a wall that I didn't know how to climb, and one day, they decided to pull the ladder away completely. It all started with a phone call that should have been ordinary, but wasn't. I had just closed a deal for a new software project I'd been pouring my heart into for months. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from my mother. I smiled. Finally, I thought. Maybe things could go back to normal. But the moment I answered, her voice, sharp and cold, sliced through me. Elena, do not ever contact us again.
What?
Mom, No explanations, no excuses. Your father and I are done with you.
Goodbye.
Click. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, my heart pounding. My father didn't even say a word. He just followed her lead. One call, one statement, and my entire family had vanished from my life as if I had never existed. I spent the next week trying to reach out, calling, texting, even emailing, but every attempt was met with silence. Then, the emails bounced back, my messages remained unread, and my calls were blocked. I was deraced. At first, I felt shock, disbelief, and an aching sadness that made my chest feel heavy. I cried a lot. I questioned myself, wondering what I had done wrong. I replayed every conversation, every argument, every moment, searching for a crack in my behavior that had led to this ultimate punishment. And slowly, anger started to replace the sadness. Anger burned through me every time I saw photos of their family gatherings on social media, photos they deliberately didn't tag me in, as if to erase my existence even further. The holidays were the worst. Birthdays, anniversaries, Thanksgiving, each occasion a reminder that I was nothing more than a ghost in my own family's world. But amidst all this pain and isolation, something in me shifted. I realized that I couldn't wait for them to come back. I couldn't force love or acceptance from people who had chosen rejection. And so I did the only thing I could do. I focused on myself. I threw myself into my work with a single-minded intensity one hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just building software. I was building a life that my parents couldn't ignore, a life that would demand recognition even if they tried to pretend I didn't exist. I started a small tech company from scratch, working nights, weekends, and every spare moment I had. I learned every trick in the book, networked relentlessly and slowly, painfully, watched it grow. And then it happened. 6 months after they had blocked my number, my company went public. Overnight, the small software startup I had nurtured turned into a billion-dollar enterprise. My name appeared on Forbes' billionaire list, bold and undeniable. And that's when I realized something that made my blood boil with a mix of triumph and fury. My family had no idea who they were dealing with. I could feel it before I even spoke to them. I knew the headlines would reach their eyes, the same eyes that once looked at me with indifference. The very people who had cast me aside like I didn't matter were about to see that I not only mattered, I had conquered, thrived, and surpassed them in ways they could never imagine. But here's the thing about revenge. It's not always about yelling or storming into a room. Sometimes, the most devastating revenge is quiet, calculated, and unstoppable. And I had 6 months to plan mine without them even realizing it. Every detail mattered. I didn't want to be angry in front of them. I wanted them to feel the sting of realization in the silence, the slow burn of jealousy and regret. Every public announcement, every media appearance, every interview, they would see me, a force they had underestimated, rising while they sat in their comfortable ignorance. And yet, even as I prepared my subtle, perfect revenge, I felt a strange mix of guilt and excitement. Could I ever forgive them if they reached out after seeing my success? Could I welcome them back into my life after 6 months of complete abandonment? My heart ached at the thought, but the fire of determination outweighed it. I had earned my power, and I wasn't about to waste it. The first clue that my plan was working came from an unexpected source, a distant cousin who still kept in touch with me, a lifeline to the family I thought I had lost forever. "Elena, have you seen the news?" she asked over the phone, her voice trembling. "Your parents, they're talking about you. They saw your name on the list. Mom won't stop asking about you, and Dad, he doesn't know what to say." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. My family, so confident in their ability to dismiss me, was now forced to confront my existence in the loudest way possible, through success, power, and undeniable proof that I had thrived without them. And as I hung up, I realized that this was just the beginning. Revenge wasn't a single act, it was a journey, a series of moves and countermoves. And now, with my name shining in the headlines, the stage was set. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city lights through the glass window. 6 months ago, they had thought they had erased me. Now, they would realize that you can block a number, but you can't block destiny. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "Let's see how they handle the storm." I never thought I'd enjoy watching my family squirm, but there's an art to it, a rhythm that makes each moment more delicious than the last. I wasn't cruel, at least not in the way most people think. My revenge wasn't about yelling or confrontation. It was about letting them feel every second of their own misjudgment. After that first call from my cousin, the trickle of news about my parents' reactions turned into a steady stream. They weren't reaching out to me, of course. They were scrambling behind the scenes, asking questions, digging, trying to find a way to contact me without admitting they had been wrong. And I watched. I listened. I learned. At first, it was subtle things. I'd see my mother at the grocery store, her eyes scanning every aisle as if she were hunting for me. My father would linger near the car dealership, pretending to browse but really just waiting to see if I'd appear. My cousin would drop small hints in conversations. "Mom keeps asking about your company," or "Dad mentioned your interview in Forbes." And I smiled to myself each time, savoring their discomfort. The most satisfying moments, though, were the ones they didn't know I was watching. My father, a man who had always prided himself on control, started making excuses for his absence in my life to anyone who would listen. My mother, who had been cold and sharp, now asked relatives for advice on how to reconnect without looking desperate. I could hear it all, pieced together through whispers and casual mentions, and I felt a strange mix of amusement and triumph. I didn't reach out. Not yet. I wasn't in a rush. 6 months of silence had taught me patience, and patience was a weapon far more precise than any confrontation. I wanted them to remember why they had blocked me in the first place, but this time, they'd remember it in reverse, realizing what they had lost rather than what I had done. And then came the invitations. Social events, charity galas, tech conventions, they were all suddenly must-attend occasions. The people who once dismissed me as a small-town girl were now calling, sending polite notes, and congratulating me on my success. Invitations with my name in gold lettering started piling up on my desk, each one a reminder of how far I had come. One evening, I received an unexpected message from my mother's assistant. It was polite, formal, but her words carried the weight of desperation. "Miss Harper, your mother wishes to speak with you. She asks for your time at your convenience." I stared at the message for a long moment. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, to hear her voice after so many months of silence. But another part of me, the part that had worked tirelessly to build this empire from scratch, whispered, "Not yet. Let them wait." Instead, I replied with a simple, cold acknowledgement. "Thank you for the message. I will contact her when I am ready." The delay felt exquisite. Every hour they waited, every minute they wondered if I would reach out, was a part of the slow, deliberate unraveling I had envisioned. And they had no idea. By now, my company was making headlines almost daily. Investors, journalists, even talk shows wanted interviews. I had become the self-made billionaire who defied her family, And while the phrase made me cringe slightly for its melodrama, I couldn't deny the power it gave me. My story was not just about wealth, it was about reclaiming my voice, proving my worth, and doing it on my own terms. It was during one of these interviews that my father finally appeared in the crowd. He had somehow managed to get a front row seat at a tech conference where I was speaking, and for the first time in months, I saw him in person. My heart didn't race with fear, it raced with anticipation. He looked older, his face more lined than I remembered, worry etched into every line. He hadn't reached out to me directly, he couldn't. Instead, he had come to watch, to see with his own eyes the person I had become. I walked onto the stage, greeted the applause, and began speaking about my journey. I spoke about the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, the friends who became family, and the drive that pushed me forward. I spoke with pride, with honesty, and with a subtle edge that only those paying close attention could detect. And there he was, in the audience, watching me with a mixture of awe and regret. My mother's eyes were damp, hidden behind designer glasses, but I could see them glistening when the light hit just right. Their expressions were unguarded, raw, and it thrilled me. After the conference, the questions poured in, media, colleagues, investors, but one of the most telling moments came when a reporter asked about my family. "Have they reached out since your success?" I smiled, carefully neutral.
No.
But I believe people recognize value in different ways. Sometimes, absence teaches the most. The words weren't just for the reporter. They were for them. I could feel it, as if my voice carried through the walls and landed in their living room like a stone thrown into calm water. The revenge wasn't violent, it wasn't dramatic, and it wasn't loud, but it was absolute. By simply existing, by thriving, I had reminded them that they had made a choice, and choices have consequences. The 6 months of silence were not empty. They were preparation, patience, and quiet strategy. And now, my parents had no control over me, no leverage, no way to erase the life I had built. Yet, as satisfying as it all was, there was a subtle, almost imperceptible tension in my chest. I had wanted revenge, yes, but I also wanted acknowledgement. Could they see me and accept me now? Could they recognize the woman I had become without trying to tear her down again? The answer wasn't immediate, and it wasn't simple. My parents were human, flawed, and scared. They had underestimated me, dismissed me, and ignored me. But beneath that fear and pride, there was still love, tangled and complicated, buried under years of disappointment and miscommunication. I had 6 months to remind them, and now, with the world watching, I had the upper hand. I didn't need to chase their approval. I only needed to let them see what they had lost. The next moves would be theirs, and I would watch, patient, as they navigated the storm they had created. Revenge, I realized, isn't about getting even. It's about showing people who they've wronged that you are untouchable, unstoppable, and unapologetically yourself. And for the first time in my life, I felt that power coursing through me like fire. I had been silent, ignored, and dismissed. But silence can be louder than screams, and absence more cutting than any words. 6 months of being blocked, of being erased from their lives, had only prepared me for this moment. I was ready for whatever came next. The day finally came when my parents decided they could no longer avoid the truth. I had given them 6 months of silence, 6 months of watching from the sidelines as I built my empire and claimed my space in a world they had tried to shut me out of. And now, they were forced to confront me, not as a child to be scolded or dismissed, but as a woman who had outgrown their control entirely. It started with a formal invitation. My father's signature, careful and deliberate, was at the bottom of a letter requesting a private dinner. My mother had added her own, separate note, one that was slightly more apologetic, but still cautious. They wanted a meeting, and the irony was delicious. After 6 months of blocking my number and pretending I didn't exist, they were now bending over backward to reconnect. I read the letters and didn't respond immediately. I let them sit on my desk for a day, letting the weight of their words and their absence sink in. The patience I had cultivated over the past 6 months was my shield, and I wasn't about to lower it just yet. They needed to understand that reconciliation required acknowledgement, humility, and recognition of the hurt they had caused. When I finally agreed to the dinner, I chose the venue. A private dining room at a five-star restaurant downtown, one with a panoramic view of the city skyline. The skyline I had come to know intimately as the backdrop of my late nights, my triumphs, and my relentless pursuit of success. I wanted them to see the world I had built, a world they had tried to ignore. The moment they walked in, I felt the years of anger, confusion, and heartbreak rise up, but I kept my composure. My mother's eyes widened slightly when she saw me, and my father's jaw tightened. They weren't prepared for the confidence, the poise, the quiet authority I carried. Gone was the uncertain, struggling girl they had dismissed. In her place stood a woman who had claimed her life on her own terms. We sat down, and for a few minutes, there was silence. Not the awkward silence of strangers, but the charged silence of people who had lived with unspoken words for far too long. I let it linger, letting them feel the weight of their choices. Finally, my father spoke.
Elena.
We didn't know we made mistakes. Blocking you, we shouldn't have. His voice trailed off, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. Pride and guilt wrestled for dominance. My mother reached out, her hand trembling slightly. We're sorry, Elena. 6 months ago, we didn't understand. We were scared, and we acted out of fear, not love. I listened. I wanted to feel the surge of anger, the temptation to lash out, but instead, I felt something else. Clarity. I had imagined this moment 100 times, each fantasy filled with rage and vindication, but the reality was quieter, sharper, and far more satisfying. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to force apologies. Their words were enough. I know, I said finally, my voice steady. I know you acted out of fear. But fear doesn't excuse erasing someone from their life. It doesn't erase the hurt you caused. You need to understand that before anything else can happen. There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. My words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. They weren't used to being challenged, to facing the consequences of their own actions, and for the first time, they felt powerless. Not in the way I had once felt powerless when they rejected me, but in a more profound, humbling way. Then I continued more gently. 6 months ago, I was heartbroken. I felt abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But I didn't let that define me. I built my life, my company, my future, without your help, without your approval. My father's eyes glistened, a mixture of pride and shame. My mother's lips trembled, but she nodded slowly. We see that now, Elena. We're proud of you. Truly. I smiled a small, knowing smile. Pride was one thing, but acknowledgement was another. They were beginning to understand the depth of what they had lost, and that understanding was more satisfying than any confrontation could have been. We talked for hours. Not about their mistakes, not about blame, but about the future, about boundaries, about the possibility of rebuilding trust. I realized that revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about teaching people the lesson they need to learn, allowing them to confront their own failures, and giving them a chance to change. By the end of the evening, something had shifted. The anger I had carried for 6 months was still there, a quiet ember, but it no longer consumed me. I had turned the pain they caused into power, into growth, and into an undeniable statement of my worth. And in that, I found a strange peace. As we walked out of the restaurant, the city lights reflecting off the glass and concrete around us, I felt a sense of triumph, not in wealth or status, but in the knowledge that I had remained true to myself, even when the people who should have loved me most tried to erase me. My parents stayed close, awkwardly, carefully, like people learning to walk again. I didn't hold their hand, didn't hug them, yet, but I let them be present. And that, in itself, was a quiet victory. They had seen me at my strongest, at my most unshakable, and they could no longer dismiss or diminish me. Later that night, as I sat in my apartment overlooking the skyline I had fought so hard to reach, I realized something important. Revenge isn't about ruining someone else's life. It's about reclaiming your own. It's about proving to yourself that you are capable, resilient, and unstoppable, no matter how many people try to block your path. And in that moment, I understood that the 6 months of silence, the hurt, and the anger had all been necessary. They had prepared me for this, prepared me to stand tall, to demand acknowledgement, and to remind my family that no amount of rejection could ever erase who I truly was. That I had been blocked, ignored, and dismissed. But I had risen. I had conquered. I had shown them and the world that nothing could stop me from becoming the person I was always meant to be. And as I turned off the lights and looked out over the city one last time, I whispered to myself, smiling, "This is only the beginning." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below to share your thoughts. And stay tuned for more thrilling revenge stories.